Hello, good afternoon. Can you all hear me? Yes, awesome. So I'm Satya Sekhar, a developer advocate with Salesforce, and as part of my job, I motivate developers to build on Salesforce Platform. Today I'm going to talk about how you can get started with Lightning Web Components. But before I start, this slide probably you like most, the forward-looking statement. So I might be talking about a few of the things which may not be generally available, so please base your decisions, purchase decisions only on what are generally available on the platform. In this session, I'm going to start with how you can get started with Lightning Web Components, what are Lightning Web Components, and then we'll see how we can create the components, how we can customize the components, how to debug the components, and then we'll also see how we can use all of these components in a kind of near real-time kind of application, or a sample application. Because this is a beginner session, I would say, I will start with a question, what are Lightning Web Components? How many of you have ever written a HTML document? Almost everyone, right? So let's start from there. So this is a simple HTML document which has some HTML elements, like it has head, it has body, it has title. These are the various HTML elements, standard HTML elements, which has some functionality. Each element has a functionality. Now, with Lightning Web Components, we can create our own elements. I would say custom elements. So if you see, you can see here contact tile. There is no element called contact tile in HTML, but we can create our own contact tile which can show the contact information. That's what we are going to do today in this session. So I can define Lightning Web Components as a custom HTML elements that are built on the web standards. When I say web standards, it's all about the standards within the browser. So if you see in the olden days, so most of the things were implemented in a JavaScript framework. There was a proliferation of frameworks, a lot of frameworks confusing everyone. So now most of the functionality you get it out of the browser itself. So if you have a framework which is based on the browser technology, that framework is going to be more efficient and easy to use. That's exactly what is Lightning Web Components. Oops, sorry. But you should also mind the difference in the names here. You can see there is a difference in both the names. I have Lightning Web Components on the left side, where L is capitalized, W is capitalized, and C is capitalized. If you see on the right side, only L is capitalized. So if you are referring to Lightning Web Components documentation anywhere, you might be seeing these two different types of references. If it is using the first type, then it means that it is referring to the framework as a whole. It is referring to the Lightning Web Components framework. But if you see something like Lightning with small web components, it is referring to the component that you are developing, that you are going to develop. So those are the components we are developing. So we'll be developing that right side components in this left side framework. So now let's understand how these components work. To start with, Salesforce provides some base components, some fundamental components using which you can create rich user experiences. In which case those components are called as experience components, which can have one or more base components in it. So what are base components? It could be as simple as your input or a logo or a image, whatever you want to put in your component. Those can be fundamental components with which you can build the experience components. So what can be an experience component? Maybe you want to show a report in your Lightning Web Component. Maybe you want to show some kind of complex functionality in this component. So that is those kind of user experiences that you can build are called as the experience components. Now, we have more than, and of course, once you build the experience components, so as you can see in the diagram here, you can build one or more experience components, and then you can configure all those components to become a page, like whatever you are seeing in the web page. A web page can contain a number of components. Now, once you create that page, you can always customize. Whenever you want, you can drag and drop the component. If you don't want a component in your page, you can simply remove the component. It's that easy. So we have more than 85 plus components, like base components, that you can use to build the experience components. While you can build your own experience components, Salesforce also provides some experience components out of the box, in which case we call them as standard components. We have like more than 50 plus standard components you can directly use. For instance, you want to use a path, you can drag and drop. Path contains many base components, but then you can just drag that component and use it. So now we understand what are base components, experience components, and what are the pages, and how you can customize. Let's see where you can customize. So there is a tool called Lighting App Builder. As you can see here, on the left side, there are some components, standard components, which you can drag and drop into the central area and connect them all together to create a page. I'm going to show you all of this in demo, so don't really worry about this slide at the moment, but let's see it in a demo in a short while. Now we understand the basic concepts. What does a lighting web component, or the element that we are going to create, contain? It contains a HTML file, a JavaScript file, and a CSS file, just like in any other web technologies. Maybe you are building page in some other technology, use the same HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. If you are building something in lighting web components, you are going to use the same thing, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Now, what is the difference? So now you have created a page, you want to deploy the page in your org, in your Salesforce application. For that, you need to configure it, for which you can use something called, for which you can use the XML file, where you can configure the things, where you want to expose your component. Maybe you want to use your component in your home page, app page, or record page, wherever. So you can do all of those configurations in the configuration file. And then there could be one file called SVG file. If you want to use a icon for your component, you can do that. You can create an icon in SVG file and then send it to the Lighting App Builder. Obviously, Lighting App Builder is going to identify your component using that SVG. So only these are the 5 files we might be using at most. If you are building a fundamental component, the bare minimum is only one file. That is the JavaScript file and a configuration file. If you have 2 of these things, that is done. But if you want to build more complex files, maybe you want to build a user interface component, then you'll use HTML. If you're just building a utility component, you'd only use JavaScript. Okay? So with that knowledge, one more thing I want to talk about is where can you build these lighting web components? There are 2 ways to build it. One is you can install a tool called Visual Studio Code in your desktop, and then we have some Salesforce extensions package. You can use that and then use it. Or the other option is we have our latest tool, modern tool called Code Builder, wherein you can develop the lighting web components within the browser itself, which does not require any installations. But then, whether you are using Code Builder or Visual Studio Code, the look and feel, the environment, everything is same. It's up to you whichever tool you want to use. And both of these tools support Salesforce extensions. So on these tools, if you are using Code Builder, it comes Salesforce extensions installed in it. But if you are using Visual Studio Code, you might be installing by yourself. But it comes with the Salesforce extensions with which you can build anything in your Salesforce application. Maybe you want to build Visual Force pages, Apex, lighting web components, whatever you want to do. And then it also has an inbuilt Salesforce CLI. Right? With that CLI, you can run any kind of CLI commands. Now with this understanding, I don't want to show too many slides. Most of the session today will be hands-on. I'll show you how we can build it to a little extent so that further from that you should be able to continue. So let's see the demo. Now let's start by building the lighting web component. Here I'm in a Visual Studio Code environment. I'll also show the Code Builder environment if time permits towards the end. Otherwise, it's the same look and feel, whether Visual Studio Code or Code Builder. On the left side, you can see an activity bar. When I click on any of these activity bar items, it is going to show a view in the sidebar. And we are going to build all of this stuff here in the central part. Now, what I've done is I've created a SFDX project. So whenever you're working on Salesforce things on Visual Studio Code or Code Builder, you'll be using a SFDX project. That's because it has a proper structure. It has a boilerplate structure so that you can easily identify the files. Where is the lighting web component files? Where are the Apex classes? You can easily see here. So it has various things like applications or classes is where you can see the Apex classes, so on and so forth. So I've created a project. Now let's see how we can create a component. So for that we can launch the command palette. You can go to View and say Command Palette. And here you can see a number of SFDX commands. And these commands are generated based on the context we are currently in. So now the project is created. So the next context is to create anything like, you want to create a component, push the source code to your org, so on and so forth. So now I want to create a lighting web component. So I can simply say create. And I can see this command, SFDX create lighting web component. Let's select this command. because this is our first component, let's say hello world. So while I'm giving the name, you can also notice that I'm using a specific notation. I'm starting with a small case letter, hello, and then for world, I've given a capital case letter. This is camel case. So if you have multi-word name, if you want to give multi-word name, you'll have to give the camel casing there. So hello world is the name I've given. Let's press enter. And then it is showing a folder where you want to save the component. Again, I told that we are using a SFDX project structure, so it's always better to store it there, but if you want to store somewhere else, you can do that. But here it shows the default project location, which is within my SFDX. Let's select that. And that's it. It has created our very first component, and on the left side you can see it has created a HTML file, a JavaScript file, and an XML file. So let's see what we can do in the HTML file. Now, let me open the HTML file. Here, I want to write, say, hello world, because this is the first component. So let's save it. I've written hello world. I want to display hello world in my web page. In the JavaScript file, you can see that we are importing a Lightning element library from Lightning element class from LWC library. So this Lightning element is inherited from your basic HTML element. So Lightning element is HTML element plus additional functionalities. So we just imported that class, and here in this JavaScript class, you can write whatever business logic you want to write. For now, we are doing a basic thing. We are just displaying hello world, so I don't want to write any business logic there. So I can leave it empty. So this is the bare minimum code. Now let's save this also, and let's open the meta file. I said we should make this available in our org. To do that, we have a tag called isExposed. Let's make it to true. And then here we'll define the targets where you want to show. And then here you can also see that it is giving us some context sensitive help. What are the things that we can type there? So I'm just selecting targets. And within target, I want to select whatever target, wherever I want to show it. Here you can see different options. I can show it in an app page, home page, record page, wherever I want. So for now, let's select, say, home page. If you want, you can add more things here. Maybe if you want to use the component in the app page as well, select put one more target with app page. Let's save it. Now, I have connected this to a org. So here if you see there is a plug kind of icon. If you click that, there are different options with which you can connect, authorize your orgs. Maybe you are currently working on your sandbox, maybe you are working in a Scratch org, wherever. So you can select authorize an org and then enter your credentials, it is connected. Here I have few orgs which I have already connected. So this I have set one of the org as the default org, recipes org. So let me go and open that org. It is deployed there. So let me open that org. I can click this button to open the org. Okay. Yeah. This is the org where I have deployed. So let's open, say, sales page. So I open the sales app. So we're all familiar with this basic Salesforce application. Now let's see how we can deploy it. To deploy it, we'll have to use the Lightning App Builder, as I said. So you can launch the Lightning App Builder by clicking the setup icon, go to setup, and from setup, you can search for the Lightning App Builder. This is one way. But the easiest way is, because I want to use the component here in this page, I can simply click this setup and click edit page. And this is the Lightning App Builder. On the left side, you can see there are standard components. As I said, standard components are provided out of the box by Salesforce Platform. These are the experience components. And if you go a little bit down, these are the custom components that we have built. So these are the components that I have built, and we can use those components. And if you further go down, there are also custom managed components. If you have installed a managed package, and if that managed package has Lightning Web Components in it, you can also use those Lightning Web Components as well in your pages. Okay, and if you further see at the bottom, you can get more Lightning Web Components from App Exchange. So there are some experience components in App Exchange. You can also get those components and use it. Now, let's search for the component that we have just built. Let's say hello world. Okay, sorry, we haven't deployed it, so I'm not able to see the component here. Let's go back once to our environment and deploy it. So how do you deploy it? You just right click and you can see a command here saying deploy this source to org. Let's deploy it. So it's going to deploy your Lightning Web Component to the connected org. Let's go back here, and here now let's search for hello world component. Let's refresh the page once and search for the hello world component. This time you should be able to find the hello world component. Yeah, here it is. You can drag that component and put it here. Now you can see that we have added the hello world component to the sales homepage. Let's save it. You might also want to activate it. So let's activate this page. And I'll make it as org default, and let's save it. That's all. So I can activate the page for my org. Maybe I want to activate the page only for a specific application. I can even do that. Okay, so I've just activated it. So let's go back and see how the component looks like. Here, you can see the component, hello world component. Okay, now let's inspect this component. Let's go and right click and say inspect. It opens the developer tools. So if you go, so here you can see the hello world component. But if you see the name is little different. We have given hello small and world with W capital there, but here it is showing C-hello-world because HTML web standard doesn't allow that camel case kind of naming convention. So everything is converted into a kebab case, where everything is in small letters and words are separated by hyphen, where C stands for the custom component. We also have some standard components. If you are using, maybe it shows the standard component name. If it's Lightning component, like base component, it says Lightning hyphen something there. Okay. Now we have created our very first component. Where can you get started? What is the best place to get started? So we have a developer website, developer.salesforce.com, where you can go to build, and here you can see code samples and SDKs, where you can find some really good open sourced library repositories, GitHub repositories, out of which one of the repository is LWC recipes repository. You can go down and search for LWC here, and you can see a LWC recipes app. You can go to the GitHub repository, and there we have given a nice easy steps to follow on how to deploy it to either your developer edition org, sandbox org, wherever. So there are different options. You can follow these steps and install it, deploy. So what I've done is, I've already deployed that application. Let me show you how that application looks like. So here I have an application, a LWC recipes application, which have various tabs like hello, data service, data table, Apex, contacts, so on and so forth. Each tab have some examples. Like hello tab has some hello examples, basic examples, just to get started. Okay. Likewise, if you want to see more advanced examples on composition or communication, how Lightning Web Components communicate, you have all the examples here. So each of the examples in this LWC recipes app is implemented either in 30 lines or less than 30 lines code. Okay, for instance, if you see this hello world example, it is the same example that we have written. You can see the code. So I have checked out the code from the GitHub repository. Let me go back to my Visual Studio Code environment. So here I'm in Visual Studio Code environment. Let me close these things. Let me open the hello component. So I have hello component, hello world.js, hello world.html. JavaScript file, meta file, it's almost same. Whatever component you use, wherever you use, oh, sorry, I opened hello world. Let me open hello. Okay, I have hello.html component, hello.js component. If you see the hello.html component, it's the same thing. I'm using hello world, instead of hello world, here I'm using hello comma something in braces, right? So I'm saying greeting. So whatever is there in braces is the property that is defined in my JavaScript file. So I can define a property in JavaScript file. Maybe I'm writing some logic in JS file. I can use that property here in my Lightning Web Component file, HTML file. Now if you see here, go back to the JavaScript file. Here you can see that I have defined greeting and I have initialized that variable to world. That's why you are seeing that. And even if you see the meta file is almost same, whatever component. Here this component is exposed both in app page, record page and home page. Okay, now we are done with very fundamentals. Let's go a little bit advanced and see a little more sophisticated example. Here you can see a hello binding example at the bottom. Let me say instead of world, let me say hello TDX. And you can see that it is dynamically changing the value from hello world to hello TDX. Let's see how it works. Let's go back to the Visual Studio Code environment. Let's close all these files. Open your hello binding.html and hello binding.js file. Let's see what's in there. This is same as our hello world example. We are having hello comma greeting in the braces, so I am getting the property from JavaScript. What's different is here I am using a lighting input element. So in the presentation I was talking about there are base components. You can use base components to build the experience components. So this lighting input element is a base component. Okay, I said there are more than 85 plus base components that you can use in your Lightning Web Components. So where can you refer to these base components? I'll show you here. Now if you go here, you can search for actually Lightning Web Components in your Google and open this component library. This is the component library where you can search for whatever component you are looking for. So on the left side you can see a lot of components. So I just want to know about input component, which I've already searched and it's open here. Whatever component you see, this documentation looks similar. It has an example, it has documentation where you can learn about what is that component, how you can use that component, and then a specification. So any attributes, if that element takes any attributes, those attributes are defined here. Like here we have accept, access key, all of these attributes you can use with the Lightning input. Now, let's go to the example here. Here you can see the example of a Lightning input. There is something like enter some text. Okay, if you see enter some text, I can change this example. This is a live playground. While you are reading the documentation, learning this stuff, you can use this live playground there. So here, instead of saying enter some text, what I will do is I'll say name. Let us say name. And here you can see that it shows name. So what you can do is you can go to the base components, type in there, test the components, and then directly copy the code from here and paste the code in your actual source code and start using it. Okay, so this is all about Lightning input element. Now, in this input element, I said we can use different properties. I have a label property, I have a value property, I have an onChange property, right? So, value property, whenever I enter something there, so it gets into the value property here. And for onChange, I have implemented a method in JavaScript. Let's see what is there in that method. So this handle change method gets event. So whenever there is a change, let us say on change, it is going to call handle change, and this handle change method gets a event. And from that event, we are getting the value. So whatever we are typing there like TDX, that value is getting into the target, from where we are copying it into greeting. Because we have copied it in greeting, greeting is a reactive property, which means whenever the property value changes, it automatically refreshes in your view, in your HTML. That's why you are changing that hello TDX value in your HTML there, right? So far we saw how to create a component and how to use the base components and stuff. Now let's quickly see how we can access the data from your Salesforce org. So let's see a couple of components for that. Now here, going back again to hello, let's go to Apex. And here we have some components which are like, where it is showing some data like contact information, which we got from the orgs. So let's see one of the components, see how the code looks like. Any guesses on how many lines we would require to get that component, like that contact information? Any guesses, anyone? One line? You're too greedy. Okay, let's see how it is. Okay, let me open that component here. Sorry. Command Shift P, and let's put that name there. It's not Command Shift P, it's Command P. Okay, let's open that component. And you were right. It was one line of code. Okay, so greedy is good. Yeah, that's why we are here. We are learning Lightning Web Components. Awesome, cool. So here we are getting the. So basically, we have a contact controller class. You see, this is a Apex class, which already has a method, which is running a SOQL query to get some information. So the method name is getContactList. So what we are doing in JavaScript file is, from Salesforce Apex, we are getting the contact controller.getContactList method as a JavaScript method. We are importing it as a JavaScript method. Once it is imported, you can use that method in the way you like. Now here we are calling that method getContactList. In fact, what we are doing is, we are wiring that getContactList methods, whatever response it is giving back, we are wiring that method to a property called contacts. So for that, we are using the wire service, which again we are importing from the LWC library. Now we have all the contacts information in the contacts field here. You can go back to the HTML file, and here you can use that contact information. But here you can see a small difference if you have already programmed in other web frameworks. Here you can see that I'm using some conditional statements like LWC if, and there is something like for each, so on and so forth. There is nothing like conditional statements or iterations that you can use in the HTML in general. So Salesforce provides something called as directives here. So you can use those directives to get that, use the conditions or iterations or loops here. Like here I'm saying, if LWC if contacts has data, you are just showing the data here. And even to show the data, how do you identify each record? You are using a key value. You are taking the contact ID, and you are identifying the record, and you are displaying the contact name. And if there is any error, in that case, you are going into the else if condition, and you can show off some error, whatever error you can display. The contacts are not available, could not access the contacts whatsoever. Okay? Now we know how to get the data there. Let's also see, as a developer, it's not just all about writing the programs. We should also be able to debug the code, right? What are the best ways to debug the code? What you can do here is, if you go back to the org, you can go to setup, and in setup you can search for debug mode. You can search for debug mode. And you can enable debug mode to a specific user. Again, so debugging is little expensive process. Don't do it in your production org. If you are working in your developer edition or scratch orgs, only then you enable the debug mode, so that you can debug and see how your component is working. Now, I've enabled the debug mode for user here already. If I go back to my Lightning Web Component, let us open the developer tools. In fact, you can open it right from here. You can go here and then open the developer tools from here. So I've opened it. And let's go here and select the element, the custom element that we have just created. Once I select this element, let's go. Here I have selected the element. Let me zoom it a little bit so that you can see it clearly. I just selected one of the elements there. It shows it is equal to $0. Whenever you are debugging something, any HTML in your browser, when you select that element will be considered as the current element, currently selected element, and its value will always be equal to $0. Now what we can do is, you can go to your component here, you can go to console, and you can see that value. What is the value of the $0 at this moment? But again, for that you need to do one more small settings. You can go to the, let me close this. Here you can see a small gear icon, which is the developer Chrome browser developer tools gear icon. You can click here, and at the bottom you can see something called as enable custom formatters. Just check mark this so that you can see the values, because we are using some custom formatters here. So let's go here, and here let us say $0 and press enter. Now you can see it is debugging the current lighting web component. It is showing some debug information. Let's dig in. Let's open object. Within that it says it is calling wire service. We just saw in the code that we are using the wire service there. Let's go in, and in that you can see that it has retrieved some set of contacts. And here you can see all of the information that it has retrieved. So if you want to debug your code and see if it is getting the right information, you can do that here. Not only that, in fact, I can also show the performance differences, but yeah, this is a beginner section. I think this should be good, more than good enough to get started. But then, how do you get started? Let's go to the presentation once again. Okay, so these are different resources. I have put a QR code there. I have posted the resources in the Salesforce community. So you can start with a quick start badge, which shows how to get started, how to install Visual Studio Code, or if you are using code builder, how to get started with that. All of those things are covered in the quick start badge. And then we have Lighting Web Components recipes. Whatever app I showed today, there is a walkthrough of that recipes. What are the different things that you can find in Lighting Web Components recipes is there in that badge. And oops. Okay, and then you can also dive into the documentation. The LWC developer guide has a very good documentation. It's not like too much to read, not like help documents of Salesforce. It's a small documentation which you can easily read and learn a lot of things out of it. And then you can also check out other sample apps, like we have a real-time implementation like e-bikes app. There are a few apps, so you can also check those sample apps as well. If you have any questions, you can ask the questions here. Otherwise, we are good. Thank you so much for attending the session.